When something is important enough, you do it even if the odds are not in your favor. If you get up in the morning and think the future is going to be better, it is a bright day, otherwise it's not. When Henry Ford made cheap, reliable cars, people said, "Nah, what's wrong with a horse?" That was a huge bet he made, and it worked. If you go back a few hundred years, what we take for granted today would seem like magic, being able to talk to people over long distances, to transmit images flying, accessing vast amounts of data, like an oracle. These are all things that would have been considered magic a few hundred years ago. I think it's very important to have a feedback loop where you're constantly thinking about what you've done and how you could be doing it better. Brand is just a perception, and perception will match reality over time. Sometimes it will be ahead, other times it will be behind. But brand is simply a collective impression some have about a product. A company is a group organized to create a product or service, and it is only as good as its people and how excited they are about creating. I do want to recognize a ton of super talented people. I just happen to be the face of the companies. People work better when they know what the goal is and why. It is important that people look forward to coming to work in the morning and enjoy working. If you're co-founder or CEO, you have to do all kinds of tasks you might not want to do. If you don't do your chores, the company won't succeed. No task is too menial. I say something, and then it usually happens. Maybe not on schedule, but it usually happens. I always invest my own money in the companies that I create. I don't believe in the whole thing of just using other people's money. I don't think that's right. I'm not going to ask other people to invest in something if I'm not prepared to do so myself. My biggest mistake is probably weighing too much on someone's talent and not someone's personality. I think it matters whether someone has a good heart. I don't believe in process. In fact, when I interview a potential employee and he or she says that it's all about the process, I see that as a bad sign. The problem is that at a lot of big companies, process becomes a substitute for thinking. You're encouraged to behave like a little gear in a complex machine. Frankly, it allows you to keep people who aren't that smart, who aren't that creative. Starting and growing a business is as much about the innovation, drive, and determination of the people behind it as the product they sell. There are really two things that have to occur in order for a new technology to be affordable to the mass market. One is you need economies of scale. The other is you need to iterate on the design. You need to go through a few versions. Talent is extremely important. It's like a sports team. The team that has the best individual player will often win. But then there's a multiplier from how those players work together and the strategy they employ. I'm interested in things that change the world, or that affect the future, and wondrous new technology where you see it, and you're like, wow, how did that even happen? How is that possible? Really pay attention to negative feedback and solicit it, particularly from friends. Hardly anyone does that, and it's incredibly helpful. If you get up in the morning and think the future is going to be better, it is a bright day. Otherwise, it's not. People should pursue what they're passionate about. That will make them happier than pretty much anything else. I wouldn't say I have a lack of fear. In fact, I'd like my fear emotion to be less because it's very distracting and fries my nervous system. If you're trying to create a company, it's like baking a cake. You have to have all the ingredients in the right proportion. I think most of the important stuff on the internet has been built. There will be continued innovation for sure, but the great problems of the internet have essentially been solved. When Henry Ford made cheap, reliable cars, people said, nah, what's wrong with a horse? That was a huge bet he made, and it worked. When somebody has a breakthrough innovation, it is rarely one little thing. Very rarely is it one little thing. It's usually a whole bunch of things that collectively amount to a huge innovation. I would just question things. It would infuriate my parents that I wouldn't just believe them when they said something, 'cause I'd ask them why, and then I'd consider whether that response made sense given everything else I knew. It's very important to like the people you work with. Otherwise, life and your job is gonna be quite miserable. I think the best way to attract venture capital is to try and come up with a demonstration of whatever product or service it is, and ideally take that as far as you can. Just see if you can sell that to real customers and start generating some momentum. The further along you can get with that, the more likely you are to get funding. Disruptive technology, where you really have a big technology discontinuity, tends to come from new companies. As much as possible, avoid hiring MBA letters. MBA programs don't teach people how to create companies. Don't delude yourself into thinking something's working when it's not, or you're gonna get fixated on a bad solution. If something has to be designed and invented, and you have to figure out how to ensure that the value of the thing you create is greater than the cost of the inputs, then that is probably my core skill. I always have optimism, but I'm realistic. It was not with the expectation of great success that I started Tesla or SpaceX. It's just that I thought they were important enough to do anyway.